actually, security is a little different from the previous two talks. So what Vint and Bill talked about are real building blocks, things that you build out of to make new systems, to enable all of the 20 years of change that Jeanette told us about earlier this morning. Security is not a block. All right? It just isn't. It's the property of trying to keep someone and kicking over the nice thing of blocks that you made. All right? So anytime, and I make this point because when I get involved in these projects and they say, well, we've got this cool thing and this cool thing, and can you sprinkle some of your security over it? You don't get it. It doesn't work that way. All right? Security is a process that has to do with people and has to do with the threats that are against our system. So let me just use that as some context. First thing, I think people are very confused about what actually falls under the auspices of security. So I thought, all right, how am I going to represent this? And due to the innovation of the last 10 years, I have Google image search. So I didn't even need to come up with a convincing image of my own. I typed computer security, and these are the first two items that come up. So one is this notion, some notion of safety, and this notion that guys with black gloves in their hands are trying to get at your computer, and you better have locks, all right? And this kind of captured this notion of fear that is embedded in what we think about security. Now, you dig a little bit deeper. You maybe go down to the second row of pictures, and you start getting all kinds of details. There's spam and viruses and botnets and worms and APTs and Lord knows what else. There are a lot of different things that are actually doing a whole lot of different things that we all lump in there in security and seem to have something to do with our concerns that something bad might happen. So if we go actually back to the dictionary, which they have online now, you don't need the book, they have this long definition. There's two parts of it that I think are really valuable. From the first part, freedom from danger and freedom from fear or anxiety. And those are actually very different things. Freedom from danger means that you are free from some threat that could get you in the future, a real danger. All right? The other one is about perception, that you are afraid that something will happen to you. And when we're lucky, those are the same. All right? Quite a few times we are actually don't even understand the dangers that we are facing, and we are afraid of things that are not, in fact, real dangers. And in fact, that's a great deal of security is trying to figure out where we are on that particular spectrum. Okay. So the other key way that security differs, and it has to do with the fact that this notion of danger and fear, where does that come from? It's not the danger that you're going to trip and fall down. It's the danger that someone will do something to you. Right? Security is different from all these other fields because we are dealing with other humans who are out to get us. Right? The adversary is fundamental to the notion of security. The reason we care about security is because we believe we are in conflict with some other individual, organization, or state. Absent the adversary, we don't care. Right? There are no security properties in the absence of an adversary. So when you think about this, this is why this is not purely a technical question, because it's about conflict mediated through computers. There's definitely computing and communication are key. But this is about conflict, and we are no more going to make conflict go away than people in the military made it go away or the police made it go away. It's that kind of regime. All right. So a problem that we have is that technological change introduces new dangers and new fears, both at the same time. And it happens, it's not unique to computer science. You know, it's cross technology. World War II era, this is how we blew people up. Today, we can blow people up remotely with, Predator drones that can shoot missiles. It's an absolute transformation in the way that you fight warfare. Similarly, 1960s bank robbery involved going into a bank with a gun. Today, there are organizations who clear out tens of millions of dollars of bank, never setting foot in any premise. So these are significant changes driven by technology. The conflict's the same. But the modality in which that takes place is now different. The biggest change that affects us in the space of computer security is the internet. In fact, this is the big change. Global connectivity, the thing that really made this an enabler is it opened up the entire, basically the world, everyone who is connected, to innovate independently without restriction. That absence of restriction is what made all of this work so successful. The same absence of restriction is what creates the vulnerabilities and the opportunities for threats. And the problems that you run into here are that everything is changing so quickly. How we use the computers are changing. What makes up the networks and systems we use is changing. And so as a result, this is a moving target. So computer security, as a result, is not a game of perfection. Right? We do not have any real systems where we say, these are secure, just go to sleep. Don't worry about it. Right? No more than we have that in defense. No one has a weapon system where they say, now that we have this, war is over. Right? There's no equivalent. So the history of this, though, is that good enough actually can be quite effective. I'll talk about a couple examples and then where we have to go. So one is e-commerce, right? So when the first web browsers came out and the notion that you might buy things online emerges, so, exemplified today in sites like Amazon, which is now a $50 billion business, people were very concerned that they're going to go online and, as you said, type your credit cards in. And why should I do that? How do you address people's concerns that people are just going to snoop their credit cards? How do I even know that I'm talking to Amazon? The solution was a protocol that you don't even think about anymore. It's just de facto, HTTPS, secure socket layer. Netscape was the first to implement this. But it is built directly out of basic and applied 6162 research funded by the NITRD community. Things like innovations in public key cryptography, efficient private key encryption, key exchange protocols, how do you build hierarchies. All of that had to have been invented first so that we could then come up with this implementation that made people comfortable shopping online. Tremendous success. Is it perfect? No. Was it good enough? Absolutely. We have a $50 billion business in which fraud rates are low. Another great example is the Tor system. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but Tor it actually comes directly out of federally funded research, is a system that allows people to anonymously surf on the internet without having their content censored. And this is rolled out across the entire planet and is used in places where there are limitations placed on their regime. It's probably the single biggest technological tool for enabling people to get unfettered access to the internet. Comes directly out of work done in this community. All right. So in fact, if you were to go in and see all of the invisible little things that your PC or your Mac does to protect you, of which there are an enormous number, everything from virtual private networks to little details like stack cookies and address-based layout randomization, malware, so almost all of these, if they don't have their seed in NITRD efforts, they benefit substantially from additional research done under the auspice of NITRD efforts. Now, you don't see any of them, but they come directly out of the innovations that take place in this community. However, like I said, this is a moving game, so we still have challenges ahead. So I'm going to talk about a few of them briefly. One of the big ones is that the way that the security game is set up today is one that is fundamentally asymmetric, the way we have set up the game with our adversaries. And I'll describe really briefly 4 asymmetries. So one is there's an asymmetry of initiative. So security tends to be a reactive game. Defenders have to respond after an attacker makes a new attack. Attackers attack at the time of their choosing. The consequence of this is fairly fundamental, particularly because our defenses are exposed. We use COTS software like everyone else. You know, dirty little secret of the anti-malware industry or antivirus industry. What fraction of new malware can be detected? 0. 0 is the answer. Doesn't matter what they tell you. The answer is 0. And the reason the answer is 0 is because anyone worth their salt who writes malware tests it against the antivirus first. So a week later they may detect it, but no, they don't detect it. And this is fundamental. This is kind of the way the system is set up. We have innovation, asymmetry in innovation. It turns out that defenses are expensive. New attacks are really, really cheap. And they're cheap both in the development cost, but they're also cheap because these guys don't have sunk business models and they don't need to sell to consumers, and you know, they don't need to worry about cannibalizing their previous product and so forth. We have an asymmetry in incentives. So this one, the first point is, I think, well understood, that the risk of attack is low because you have either functional anonymity and the likelihood of prosecution, or really any kind of action taken against you tends to be quite low. But the other one, I think, is less well appreciated, that there is low reward to defend. And that's not to say that all the people working on security products in academia and industry and government don't work really hard. They do. It's this last issue that we have an asymmetry in evaluation. We don't know how to measure how much more secure our system is with technology X versus technology Y. You use Symantec or McAfee. Why? Is it because one has 6 more quatloos of security than the other one? We don't know. We don't know at all. No one knows. We don't know how to talk about that. The bad guys know how to talk about it. It's, did I take over more machines? Did I make more money? Did I get more information out of the organization? They can measure it directly. This gives them a strategic advantage when doing these kinds of things. All right. So that's one challenge. The other challenge we have is we have new adversaries. So starting about 6 years ago, we now have e-crime as a business. And so I'm not expecting you to remember all of your Russian. But this, you're used to you're used to this notion that machines get compromised. What you may not realize is that there's a vibrant ecosystem with multiple tiers of middlemen. This is a site that will sell you compromised hosts. On the next slide, here's the price sheet, which you probably can't read, but the ballpark is it's about $100 for US hosts and $4 for Asian hosts per 1,000. Per 1,000, that's the cost. And you can buy them. It's retail. It's a retail market. Say, I would like 1 million hosts. You provide your money, you get 1 million hosts. All right? And this isn't the only one of these. There are about 15 of these at any given time who are in this business. This is an example we tracked. This is, when you get all that spam, this is actually a very sophisticated business. So this is an example of the Grum botnet. We actually know the guy is in Russia who sends this thing. It's a compromised host in Maryland. It gets clicked on. Then, it has to go and you go to get a domain that was from a names registry in Russia. It, in turn, is provided name service from a name server in China. It's redirected to a web proxy host. All of these are owned by individual people who are independent parts of this business, by the way. A compromised host in Brazil that acts as a proxy reaches back to Moscow to an affiliate program who represents these interests. At this point, you can place a purchase through a relationship with an Azerbaijani bank who is actually normally in the pipeline business but has agreed to accept visa processing, and then with an Indian merchant, a drop shipper of pharmaceuticals. At this point, the transaction happens, everyone gets their commission cut, and they make money. And this is just one example. These are very sophisticated businesses, and it's totally new. 6 years ago it was not true. Today, e-crime is a very sophisticated business. Another new source of adversary that you're, I think, well aware of is mass action or hacktivism. So this anonymous, low-sec, and so forth presents, I think, a fundamentally new kind of threat because of the loose coupling of its organization and because its motivations, unlike the other case, are not economic. They're broad and highly influenceable. And so it creates, new adversaries create new challenges in this space. And then the last set of new adversaries that unfortunately we need to deal with are the notion of state actors. And so I think both in the context of espionage and also in the case of sabotage and cyber war and so forth, these are, I don't think they're concerns that are imminent in the sense that, I don't worry at night about whether the lights are going to be on because of this, but they're real. And part of the reason they're real is this last issue, which is the Internet of Things that a number of people mentioned. So computers are in everything, really everything. I mean, Nike shoes have computers in them. Your Xerox machine, your phone, every Otis elevator manufactured since 1998 effectively has IP control, right? It's an Internet device. Your toys, your refrigerators, almost all of our process control plants, trains, planes, and automobiles. So just, here's some 2 real-life examples to drive this home. My colleagues, Kevin Fu and Yoshi Kono from University of Washington a couple years ago demonstrated with real implantable cardiac defibrillators that remotely they could query them and find out who the person was and what their condition was. But more than that, they could wirelessly, remotely induce them to shock the heart and make your heart stop. Right? That's real. That's a real issue. Yoshi and myself, as well as our students, did another demonstration over the last couple of years with consumer automobiles, which, as so many people mentioned today, are really computers. They're distributed systems with wheels. 1,000 miles away, we can take over an unaltered consumer automobile, track where it goes, listen to every conversation that's in it, and turn the brakes off. You step on the brakes, nothing happens. Right? It's a computer, and so because it's a computer, it is open to these same kinds of threats. And this is going to be, I think, a significant problem we have, because the embedded world is a very different one from the one that we've been used to dealing with desktops and servers and so forth. So with that, security really is not, it's not an innate property that remains static over time. Security is really a game of innovation. It's you and the adversary. What are the real threats that you have to deal with? How quickly are they innovating, and what are you doing to innovate? And this is exactly, I mean, this is a game of keeping up or staying ahead. And as I think Bill mentioned earlier, you know, Robert Mueller was nice enough to point out that this is one of our major challenges ahead. NITRD has been has basically been the only major funder of cybersecurity research, and now is not the time to stop. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
So you indicated that you're not too worried about a major cyber attack right now, but if one were to happen, my guess is it might take days, weeks, or even months to recover, especially if it hit one of our critical pieces of infrastructure. So we probably learn something from that and try to get organized to deal with it more effectively the next time. What is your sense of the right split between governmental approach to the problem and private sector approach, other than having more researchers work on the problem?
So that's a great question. So some of the research actually, I think, ends up being in figuring out, so there are technical issues that have to be addressed with respect to some threat, and then there end up being structural issues about why certain avenues are not available to you. All right? So the business model, the politics, and what's and so one model is you come in from on high and you say, we're kicking you all out and we're taking over the power industry and we're going to take over every critical infrastructure and do it right. And I think that's hard. And so I think one of the real challenges is in figuring out what are the right set of incentives and technologies that will address the problems in a way that works. So when we work with the automotive industry, we go in with a set of preconceptions about what's easy to do. And boy, were we wrong about what was easy to do. We needed to understand the automotive industry to understand how to build security for cars, which turns out to be a very different problem. And so I think there is an opportunity for applied research close to those spaces. A lot of times the gap between those industries and the researchers is larger than it need be.